Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Dam and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies, and today we're going to talk about 10 stunningly underrated movies you can currently catch on Netflix. So this is going to be a list of 10 really great movies that are all stunningly beautiful to look at. Some are dark, some are not, but they're all underrated and underappreciated. There will be some hidden gems on this list that you have never seen or heard of, as well as some movies you likely saw, but that probably deserve a second look, and I'm going to tell you why. But we're going to start this list all the way at the back with easily the least known movie on this list, a Netflix original from South Korea called Night in Paradise. Now, South Korea is currently home to some of the best gangster movies currently being made today. Night in Paradise is it's not my favorite, but it is a great example, and it's very accessible. Being a Netflix original, not only is it available on Netflix and will be for the foreseeable future, but they also did a great job with the dubbing. Now, I know a lot of you that have been watching foreign films for a long time are adapted to subtitles, and it is the better way to take in most of these movies. However, I am not a snob about it. Especially if the dubbing is good, I recommend going for it. I would much rather have people watch a movie like this with the dubbing than to not watch it at all. This is a bloody gangster movie with some really great characters. While this isn't the best South Korean gangster movie, if you're looking to get into that genre, this one could be a great gateway movie for you. My next pick is also a Netflix original, and it also came out within the past year. It's called Malcolm and Marie. Now, this is quite different from Night in Paradise. There's literally no violence in this movie because this is more of a performance piece. In this movie, you've got Zendaya and John David Washington as the only, and I mean only, characters, and essentially the setup is it's just a couple arguing for about 90 minutes. Now, as horrible as that sounds, this is saved by John David Washington's performance. Don't get me wrong, Zendaya is good in it, but John David Washington is doing some things on another level, and he's really carrying this. I mean, just the opening monologue of his has almost nothing to do with the rest of the story. It's kind of just a gripe about the film industry, and he delivers it. It works. His performance is interesting for the bulk of the movie. If you find that you typically like movies like this, that are high drama, I mean, it's almost more like a small stage play or something, if that is your cup of tea, pour yourself a big glass of this one. If not, don't worry, I've got some other stuff on this list for you. Now, we're only on number 8, but we're already to the movie that is the reason I decided to make this particular video. Netflix recently added What Dreams May Come. This stars Robin Williams and Cuba Gooding Jr. Even though this movie is over 20 years old, it is filled with some of the most stunning imagery you're currently gonna catch on Netflix. But it is worth mentioning that this is a downer of a movie. In this movie, Robin Williams dies and goes to heaven, but unlike the way you would normally see that in a movie where there's pearly gates and people dressed in white, this is a stunningly beautiful dream world that he is in. However, it is worth mentioning this movie goes to an extremely dark place. It goes to a dark place early. This is a downer of a movie. It deals with the afterlife and death, heaven and hell, but the imagery of heaven and even the imagery of hell is quite beautiful. A lot of it looks like old classical paintings, and it's just breathtaking. The movie itself is a little bit loose. It's not quite tight and packed together. It's not the best overall movie, which is why it's so far back, but it is a stunning experience and does deserve to be watched. Director Todd Phillips is most famous for movies like The Hangover and Old School, really great comedy director, but his most recent movie was Joker. You can currently catch that on HBO. It is not on Netflix in the US, but prior to that, he did a movie with Jonah Hill and Miles Teller called War Dogs. In this movie, they play very young arms dealers. This is based on a true story. Obviously, some of it is embellished, but this is a really slick movie. I think it has a lot in common with movies like Wolf of Wall Street, not just because Jonah Hill is in it, but it is about guys who get wrapped up in crime and excess. The cinematography is great. Even the color palette's a little oversaturated. That all looks good. Bradley Cooper has a very small but important role. He's great in it. This is just an underrated gem that I know did okay when it came out, but if you missed it or maybe watched it passively the first time, it is much better than it appears to be and does deserve to be watched with your undivided attention. Now, for another gangster movie that I think is highly underrated, partially because it doesn't quite sit with you right on the first viewing. It does take multiple viewings for it to kind of get under your skin and for you to really understand not just what the movie is about, but why it looks the way it looks and everything like that, is Killing Them Softly. Now, this stars Brad Pitt, but also Ben Mendelsohn, Ray Liotta, James Gandolfini has a really small but extremely appropriate role in the movie as well. For someone who is kind of obsessed with gangster movies, Goodfellas being my favorite of all time, Killing Them Softly looks at that world through a different lens and through a different time period, sort of a changing landscape in America as well. That's sort of the backdrop for this movie. It takes place in New Orleans not too long after Katrina. Everything's desolate looking. It's just got so many things working for it. I do think it takes multiple viewings for you to really enjoy it, but some of the best movies of all time fall into that category. This is an absolute gem. Again, if maybe you watched it, you didn't love it the first time, but you generally like gangster movies like this, I recommend going in and watching it again. But let's say you don't live in the US and all these movies are not available to you, or you're watching this in the future and they're not available, or you are in the US, you can watch every single one, but now that I put the bug in your ear about gangster movies, you want to watch Goodfellas or something else, you can unlock a ton of movies using the right kind of VPN service. Now, Netflix and other streaming services do block the use of VPNs. However, CyberGhost has specialized servers that allow you to use Netflix in various countries, including the US, UK, Germany, Australia, Canada, and a bunch more. And they have completely different movies and shows to offer there. Like big budget American movies that are not available on Netflix in the US, they're available in other countries. You can unlock them immediately with the flick of a switch using today's sponsor, CyberGhost VPN. Just use the link in the description and my viewers can pay as low as $2.19 a month to unlock way more movies and shows. CyberGhost is super easy to use and they boast a 45-day money-back guarantee, so there's virtually no risk, and they have 24/7 customer support to help you get it set up on multiple devices. Speaking of devices, you can use it on up to 7 different devices at the same time, and it's all the different types of devices you already have in your home. So to get the deal, go to the link in the description. Again, pay as low as $2.19 a month. That's less than half the cost of a new release movie rental to unlock huge new libraries of content. It is a great deal. I personally love using it, but let's go ahead and move on with my top 5 on this list. So it comes as no surprise that Martin Scorsese is my favorite director, and while he does have some beautiful, some stunning movies in his filmography, I think far and away his most beautiful movie is also the most family-friendly movie he ever did, Hugo. This one's got kind of a simple setup. It's about a young orphan boy that lives in this stunning train station. Again, incredible visuals with this one, but also great characters and everything. But this movie holds a little bit of a secret. This movie eventually becomes a lot more about the love of movies and filmmaking, which I was very surprised by. The marketing for this movie didn't lead you to believe that. But in addition to that, you get some incredible CGI environments. As lame as that might sound to some ears, Hugo is a great example of how that can be done right. It's done with this artistry, not to necessarily make the environment look 100% realistic, but to make it pop off the screen and be this beautiful place that you want to spend 2 hours. The Green Knight is one of those movies that got delayed because of COVID that I have been anticipating for well over a year. It is about to come out. July is the month, but the writer-director David Lowery, one of his other more stunning movies, is currently available on Netflix. It is called A Ghost Story. Now, this is not a horror movie. I would compare this movie a lot more to the work of Terrence Malick, movies like The Tree of Life. This one is about a man who dies and comes back sort of to haunt his wife, but it's much more about the afterlife. In fact, this movie and What Dreams May Come could make for an amazing double feature, but you're gonna wanna keep some tissues handy because that would be a heavy heavy double feature. In fact, that's a horrible recommendation. Don't do that. You're gonna be in the dumps for a week if you do that. But this is a beautiful movie. It's got a beautiful take on the afterlife. It comes across with very few words in this movie. This is almost a silent movie, meaning there's not a lot of dialogue at all. And there's so much communicated to you. It does take a little bit of time, and it is a little strange at times, but it manages to work really, really well and is one of the more beautiful things on Netflix right now. Now, as stunning and beautiful as all these movies are, we're gonna rough things up a little bit with The Outlaw Josey Wales. This is one of my all-time favorite Westerns. This is probably like my third or fourth favorite Clint Eastwood Western. He did so many good ones, but it is particularly good. In fact, Clint Eastwood is an unaccredited director on this movie, and as we all know, he would go on to have an amazing directing career. Looks like he did a pretty good job with The Outlaw Josey Wales. I will say though, this is a very long movie and it does have a fairly slow pace to it, mainly because of its age. You are gonna have to be a little bit patient, but this movie really is like a good aged whiskey that you just wanna sip slowly and enjoy. There are so many great scenes with great characters that come and go out of the movie very quickly. So you get all these great character actors doing these little performances and this really epic journey of this Josey Wales character as well. Just top-notch vintage stuff. If you've not ever really watched anything like this or it's been a while, The Outlaw Josey Wales is a top shelf pick.
By several high-tech companies, but dipped again, reacting to reports that Nicholas Van Orton had sneezed. Are you going to spend the rest of the evening prying at that clown's mouth?
David Fincher managed to squeeze onto this list because they just added The Game to Netflix. For some weird reason, this is one of David Fincher's lesser known movies, and it's one of his better movies, in my opinion, as well, at least in terms of entertainment value. In this movie, Michael Douglas is set up with a company that is going to sort of turn his life into a game. If that sounds vague, it also sounds very vague in the movie. Not even he knows exactly what is going to happen, but it's very difficult to tell if he's stuck in some sort of plot aimed at destroying his life, or if he really is in some elaborate game. This movie has some incredible cinematography with cameras aimed at some really interesting imagery from the beginning of the movie all the way to the end. You could take still shots from every single scene in this movie and come away with something really visually striking, putting it squarely at number 2 on the list. That said, my number 1 pick is probably the most known and most watched movie on this list, but it does deserve this spot, and that is Paul Thomas Anderson's Boogie Nights. At this point in time, while Boogie Nights put Paul Thomas Anderson on the map as one of the best directors working today, and time hasn't quite forgotten it, it's also not really regarded as one of his best. I think this movie has aged to a point where it has become a classic. And I think a lot of people somewhat forget about it because of his other work and because there's so many other movies that take place during this time period that are so good. And I'm also fully aware that a lot of people may have passed on this over the years because it does take place with the porn industry as the backdrop. However, you've got amazing performances from everyone, including Burt Reynolds, but especially Mark Wahlberg. This might be his best performance ever, and it's one of his early ones. But it's also this amazing time capsule to the 70s. I was not alive during that era, but this movie is so rich with pop culture imagery, cars, clothes, the soundtrack is amazing. It is an incredible movie. They just added it back to Netflix. If it's been a while since you've seen it, it's a top tier Darren Van Dam pick. Let me know in the comments what you look forward to watching, and help me thank the Patreon supporters. They have done a great job of supporting the channel over the years. If you would like to become one, there is a link in the description below. There's also a link down there where you can become a channel member, or you can just click that join button right below the video and see what the details are to get access to exclusive videos right here on YouTube. But I will keep making Netflix lists as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this special, stunning list, and you will see me on the next one.